Before we dive in, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories. The man who refused to blink. They called him the Consigliere who never slept. Old school suit, tie-pin neat, shoes that held a shine like a quiet warning. He didn't speak fast. He didn't move fast. He just watched, calm eyes under a brim, clocking every exit, every whisper, every lie that thought it could pass. His name was Sonny Franzese Sr., and if you were smart, you said it softly. He came up the hard way, lean kitchens, crowded rooms, a family that measured respect not by words but by whether you showed up on time and kept your hands clean. He understood early that talk draws heat, and heat draws ruin. So he learned to be a shadow among louder men. At night, diners glowed with neon and cigarette fog. He'd sit in the far booth, back to the wall, listening. Young toughs bragged about easy money and quick trouble. He kept his face still. The city rewarded patience, not noise. When a problem walked through the door, somebody short on cash or courage, John didn't threaten. He asked questions. He let silence work. The room would shrink to his voice when it finally came, low and measured. He didn't promise safety. He promised consequences. And people believed him. John didn't stumble into the mob. He studied it. In those years, the Colombo family ran parts of New York like a quiet empire: bars, docks, unions, even the bakeries owed a slice. To most, it was chaos. To John, it was order disguised as crime. He saw discipline in it, a code stronger than any law the city ever wrote. He started as a runner, the kind who kept his mouth shut and his shoes dry. He remembered names, debts, and the way men looked when they lied. That memory made him useful. Soon he was sitting closer to the bosses, not talking, just learning how a nod could seal a deal or how silence could crush a man's confidence. The night they made him, the room was dim, thick with smoke and vows. A pinprick of blood, an image of a burning saint, and the oath, loyalty till death. John didn't flinch. He didn't need to. He already lived by it. From that night on, he wasn't just Sonny Franzese. He was Sonny. The man others whispered about when things needed fixing. And in that life, fixing things always meant someone else was going to bleed. Sonny never wanted to be the loudest man in the room. He wanted to be the one everyone waited to speak. While others flashed rings and bragged about money, he built power through patience. He made people owe him without even realizing it. One favor here, a quiet loan there, and before long, half the street was working off his kindness. He moved through the city like smoke, never staying too long, never drawing light. His business spread across clubs, construction sites, even movie deals that looked clean on paper but smelled like the street underneath. Everyone respected his calm, but nobody mistook it for weakness. You crossed Sonny once, you never got a chance to do it again. He treated money like a tool, not a prize. Respect was the real currency. That's why bosses trusted him, because he didn't crave attention, just control. His advice carried weight, his words settled disputes before blood had to. In the mob, that made him something rarer than feared. He was trusted. But the higher he climbed, the more eyes turned his way. And in that world, too many eyes meant trouble was already on the horizon. By the late 1960s, Sonny wasn't just part of the Colombo family, he was shaping its rhythm. He knew who to pay, who to pressure, and who to pretend didn't exist. Deals weren't made in daylight. They happened in the corners of cigar lounges, in the back seats of parked Cadillacs, in diners that never closed. He spoke softly, always 2 steps ahead. When bosses argued, Sonny listened first. Then, when he finally spoke, everyone stopped. He had that rare ability to make men with guns lower their voices and think. He earned his nickname, the Consigliere who never slept, because he rarely did. Every night, he called, met, planned, shifted. His mind worked like a chessboard where every piece was alive. Federal agents started whispering about him. They couldn't catch him on tape, couldn't find him holding money or a gun. But they knew he was behind everything. He had the kind of discipline the law couldn't predict, old school, silent, methodical. But even shadows have limits. When power starts growing too clean, too perfect, it begins to attract a different kind of danger, the kind that doesn't come from the street, but from within your own circle. Sonny always believed loyalty was the only insurance in that life. But loyalty, he learned, had an expiration date. By the 1970s, younger guys were coming in, loud, reckless, high on money and ego. They didn't understand the old codes. They didn't respect silence, they respected speed. Deals got sloppy. Drugs started moving through the families, something Sonny despised. He warned them. He said drugs bring heat, and heat burns everyone. But greed doesn't listen. The streets were changing, and even the old bosses couldn't keep up. Men he once mentored started looking at him like a relic, too careful for a city that now ran on chaos. Still, Sonny stayed sharp. He adjusted, made alliances, kept his distance from the mess. But when the FBI turned its spotlight on the families, it wasn't the gang wars or rival bosses that threatened him, it was betrayal. One by one, old friends disappeared, and young faces began showing up in courtrooms. Whispered names. Hidden wires. The streets that once bowed to Sonny's quiet power started buzzing with rumors that someone close had flipped. And in the life he lived, that rumor was as deadly as a bullet. Sonny had always trusted silence more than words, but now, silence felt dangerous. The FBI had changed the game. They didn't chase gangsters with Tommy guns anymore. They used tape. Bugs and lamps, microphones in cars, wires stitched into the lining of jackets. He'd walk into a restaurant and pause just long enough to hear the hum of electricity. He could sense when a man's eyes darted too fast or when his story came rehearsed. The paranoia wasn't fear, it was survival. The feds were closing in on everyone, and the new generation was careless. They talked too much, partied too loud, and forgot who might be listening. When the commission trial hit in the mid-80s, names that were never meant to be spoken filled federal files. Bosses, underbosses, soldiers, all exposed. But Sonny? He slipped through again, clean. The FBI called him the ghost. No fingerprints, no wiretap, no witness could ever pin him. Still, he knew the clock was ticking. The law could wait decades. They didn't need to catch you red-handed, they just needed time. And Sonny, the man who never slept, was finally beginning to realize that time was the one enemy even he couldn't outthink. By the time the 90s rolled around, the old world was dying slow. The diners were gone, the union envelopes thinner, the bosses older and tired. The streets that once ran on fear now ran on cameras and lawyers. Sonny had survived longer than most, not by luck, but by discipline. But even discipline has a price. They finally came for him in 2008. He was 91 years old. 91, and still dangerous enough for the FBI to put him in cuffs. The charge? Bank robbery conspiracy. It sounded almost absurd, a man who'd once counseled bosses accused of plotting with kids half a century younger than him. But to the feds, it was symbolic. They weren't just arresting a man, they were closing a chapter. In court, Sonny sat straight, sharp suit, shoes polished. He didn't flinch, didn't beg. When reporters shouted questions, he smiled faintly, as if amused by the irony of still being hunted after a lifetime of quiet power. Even behind bars, guards and inmates alike respected him. He moved slow, but his eyes, they were still alive. Watching. Calculating. The Consigliere hadn't forgotten how to listen. And deep down, he knew this wasn't the end. Just another test of silence. Prison couldn't break Sonny Franzese. It only slowed the clock. Inside, he carried himself like he always had, clean, calm, untouchable. Younger inmates whispered his name like a myth. To them, he was a living ghost from an era when men wore suits to meetings and died with their mouths shut. He never joined the noise. No complaints, no stories. He'd sip his coffee, fold his paper, and let others talk themselves into trouble. Guards said he still woke up before dawn, shoes polished, hair slicked back, a ritual from a world that no longer existed. To Sonny, routine was survival. It kept him sharp in a place designed to make men dull. When parole officers asked him about remorse, he shrugged. "What's there to be sorry for?" he'd say. "I live my life the way I wanted. You live yours." It wasn't arrogance, it was clarity. The rules had been his religion. He served 8 years. When he finally walked out, he was 98, thin, fragile-looking, but still steady. Cameras flashed. Reporters called his name. He gave them one last half-smile and said, "I never ratted on nobody." In that moment, silence itself sounded like defiance. Freedom, for Sonny Franzese, felt like déjà vu, the same streets, but a different world. The neon lights were colder now, the faces younger, the codes gone. Men no longer earned respect, they chased followers. The mob, as he knew it, had dissolved into memory and documentaries. He lived quietly in New York, surrounded by ghosts of his own making. Old friends were gone. Sons had grown up and chosen their own roads, some loyal, some not. One of them had even testified against him years earlier. It hurt, but Sonny never said a word about it. Betrayal was part of the life, pain came with the suit. Neighbors said he still dressed sharp every morning, tie knotted, shoes polished, even when he wasn't going anywhere. It wasn't vanity, it was armor. At over 100 years old, he'd survived everything: bullets, prisons, betrayals, and time itself. When people asked how he lasted that long, he'd smirk and say, "I minded my business." That was his creed, simple, lethal, and honest. But the nights grew quieter. And for a man who'd spent a century listening to the city breathe, the silence was starting to feel unfamiliar. In 2020, John Sonny Franzese passed away at 103, the oldest active mobster in America. No shootout, no betrayal, no confession. Just a quiet end to a loud legend. The papers called him the last real gangster. But those who'd known him, even briefly, said he was something rarer, a man who stayed loyal to his code when everyone else traded it for comfort. He had lived long enough to see the life fade into myth, to watch the old ways replaced by greed without honor. He'd once told a reporter, "The minute you break your word, you break yourself." Maybe that's why he survived so long. In a world of rats and turncoats, silence became his immortality. His story isn't about glory or crime, it's about control. About how a man can walk through a life of violence without letting it own him. Sonny understood what most men never do: power means nothing if it costs you your peace. He left behind no speeches, no apologies, just that old quiet stare, the kind that said everything without saying a word. Don't forget to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more gangster stories like this one.